It was the day I decided to follow my dreams, the day I would prove them all wrong. But it wasn't supposed to happen this way. I never expected them to laugh at me. You see, growing up, I'd always admired the idea of greatness. Not the kind that society thinks is important, like fame or fortune, but the kind that comes from doing something bigger than yourself, something that tests the very limits of your potential. My parents, however, didn't see it the way I did. I come from a family where dreams were discouraged, and expectations were as thick as the walls in our house. My father had built his life on the idea that success was a simple equation: hard work plus consistency equals a comfortable life. His small business was the pillar of our household, and his dream for me was to join the family business, not to chase abstract ideals like excellence or discovery. And my mother, always by his side, stood by her own version of the truth. Work hard, stay humble, and don't waste time on ambitions that were beyond reach. From a young age, I was conditioned to believe that success meant fitting into their mold. But deep down, there was a hunger inside me. It wasn't enough for me to just live in the shadows of their world. I wanted to build something of my own, to stretch the boundaries of what I thought I could achieve. MIT wasn't just a school for me, it was a symbol, a beacon of hope, a place where I could finally prove that I wasn't bound by the limitations they imposed. I had dreamed about it endlessly, studied for it relentlessly, and finally, I gathered the courage to apply. But as soon as I told my parents, everything I thought I knew about love, support, and trust came crashing down. The moment I broke the news to them, I expected encouragement, or at least a thoughtful conversation. What I didn't expect was the laughter. Their voices, once warm and comforting, now felt cold and dismissive. You, my tea? My father's voice broke the silence like a whip. You barely passed high school with average grades, and now you think you can get into MIT? My mother joined in, her tone sharp and incredulous. What about the family business? Are you just going to throw away everything we've worked for to chase some ridiculous dream? You'll never make it there, believe me. Each word they spoke twisted inside me like a dagger, and the laughter that followed echoed in my ears, ringing louder with every second. They were dismissing me. Not just my application, but my very essence. They laughed because they thought I was foolish. They thought I was delusional for believing that I could be more than what they had planned for me. I felt my stomach churn. My whole life, I had lived to make them proud, to meet their expectations, but at this moment I realized how little I mattered to them, how insignificant my dreams were in their eyes. I had trusted them. I had believed in them. But now I could see their belief in me was non-existent. The sting of their laughter burned like acid. I fought back tears, swallowing the lump in my throat as I turned away. My heart felt heavy, but worse than the weight of my own pain was the disbelief that the people closest to me, the ones who were supposed to have my back, had just ripped the rug out from under me. It was a betrayal I didn't expect from my own flesh and blood. I had always been the good child, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who did everything by the book. But in that moment, I realized that being good had meant nothing. My dreams, my hopes were laughed at, dismissed like they were worthless. For the first time, I felt small and visible. I felt like my very existence had been a mistake in their eyes. I wanted to scream, to fight back, to make them see me, but the words wouldn't come. How could I argue with their truth when I had never been strong enough to stand up for myself before? As the days passed, their laughter stayed with me. I couldn't escape it. Every time I tried to study, I heard it. Every time I thought about my future, it echoed in my mind. Their words poisoned everything I thought I knew about myself. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. But the anger wasn't just at them, it was at myself. I had let them control my life for so long, I had let their opinions shape who I was. How could I have been so blind? Why did I believe that my worth was tied to their approval? I tried to focus on school, on my future, but each attempt to focus only served to remind me of what they had said. Their doubt became my own. The voice of my father telling me I wasn't good enough. The voice of my mother telling me I was wasting my time. It haunted me like a shadow, following me everywhere. But deep inside, something began to shift. The same fire that had once burned within me, fire that had driven me to apply to MIT, started to grow again, but this time it was fueled by anger. I began to wonder, what if they were wrong? What if I could prove them wrong? What if I could show them that I was capable of something greater than they could ever imagine? The turning point came one night when I was alone in my room. The letter from MIT had been sitting on my desk for weeks, half forgotten, buried under my own self-doubt. I had been afraid to open it, afraid that it would just confirm everything my parents had said. But in that moment, something in me snapped. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let their laughter define me. I stood up, walked over to my desk, and grabbed the envelope. My heart raced as I tore it open. The moment I saw the word congratulations, my breath caught in my throat. I was in. I had made it. But that moment wasn't filled with triumph. Instead, a wave of guilt and bitterness washed over me. This wasn't just a victory over MIT, it was a victory over my parents. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this victory wasn't going to feel as sweet as I'd imagined. It felt like a hollow victory. A victory that came at a cost. I knew I couldn't just forget what they had done. I couldn't ignore the way they dismissed my worth. I had to make them see. I had to make them understand that I was more than what they had tried to make me. But as the realization hit me, I knew there was more to it than just proving them wrong. There was something deeper at play here. Something I couldn't ignore. I wanted to make them regret laughing at me. I wanted to make them feel the weight of their dismissal. But most of all, I wanted them to understand the pain they had caused me, the betrayal that had shaken my very foundation. The decision wasn't easy. I knew it would come with consequences, and I knew I would have to live with them. But in that moment, I made a vow to myself. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to be just another child living in the shadow of my parents' expectations. I wasn't going to prove them wrong out of spite. I was going to prove them wrong because I deserved to. Because I had worked for it. Because they had underestimated me. And as I stood there, clutching the letter, a new feeling began to rise inside me. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was determination. A resolve that burned brighter than anything I had ever felt before. I wasn't just going to go to MIT, I was going to excel. I was going to show them that I was capable of more than they could ever imagine. I was going to succeed not because they doubted me, but because I knew my worth. And so my journey began one where I would not only conquer my dreams, but take back the power that had been stolen from me. But little did I know this was only the beginning of a long and difficult path. The road ahead would not be easy, and the betrayal of my parents would follow me. But now I was determined to turn that betrayal into something much greater than any success they could have ever imagined. The acceptance letter from MIT had changed everything. I thought it would be the key to proving to my parents that I could do something great, something worthy of respect. But when I returned home after the news, I found a silent wall between us, an invisible divide I couldn't cross, no matter how hard I tried. I had prepared myself for their pride, for their joy in seeing their child succeed, but that moment never came. Instead, there was just the deafening silence that hung in the air. Their disapproval, disguised as indifference, loomed like a shadow over every conversation. I felt lost. I had worked so hard to get here, to climb the mountain they had insisted was too steep for me. Yet now that I had finally reached the summit, they weren't there to share the view. I had expected their acceptance, their validation, their approval. What I received instead was cold detachment. They never mentioned MIT again, never brought up the sacrifices I had made, the time spent studying late into the night, the moments when I put everything aside to make this dream come true. Instead, my father would talk about the business, as though my achievement meant nothing. My mother would go on about the family's future, as if my future had already been decided for me. The truth sank in with painful clarity. This wasn't just about not believing in me. It was about them never truly seeing me for who I was. It was about them not caring enough to even try. I would sit at my desk, surrounded by the echoes of their laughter. The laughter that had stung so deeply when I had first told them about MIT, I tried to bury it, tried to focus on the work ahead. But every time I picked up my pen or opened my books, I saw their faces, their smug expressions, their dismissive smiles. For a long time, I thought it was my fault. I thought I had done something wrong, that maybe my dream was too big too impossible for them to understand. But with every passing day, the bitterness grew. The anger bubbled up inside me, bubbling over like a cauldron threatening to explode. I thought back to the years I had spent trying to be what they wanted me to be, the obedient child, the dutiful son. I had followed every instruction, every rule they had set for me. I had worked hard in school, sacrificed my free time to help out with the family business, and quietly watched as my own dreams were ignored, dismissed, or worse, ridiculed. There had been a time when I looked up to them, when I thought they had all the answers, when I believed that their version of life was the only way to succeed. But now, standing at the crossroads of my future, I realized that their dreams were not mine. They never were. I had believed that they loved me unconditionally, that their approval would always be a constant in my life. But now I saw it for what it was, manipulation. They had kept me small, held me back, not because they cared, but because they needed me to stay in their world, where I was just another cog in their machine. As much as I wanted to hate them for it, as much as I wanted to turn my back and walk away, I couldn't. They were still my parents, the people who had raised me, who had shaped me in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. But the betrayal cut so deeply, I couldn't ignore it. And it wasn't just about their dismissive reaction to MIT, it was everything. It was their constant underestimation of me, their refusal to believe in my potential. The pain of that betrayal gnawed at me, but there was something more, something darker growing inside me. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a desire to make them realize the weight of their words, to make them understand the cost of dismissing my dreams. But the anger wasn't just directed at them. It was also directed at myself. How had I allowed myself to be so blind? How had I let their doubts seep into my bones, let it dictate the way I saw myself? I had let their voices drown out my own, let their version of the world define me. I spent days in turmoil, torn between the love I still felt for them and the anger that threatened to consume me. I hated that I was so torn, so conflicted. But in the quiet of my dorm room, in the stillness of the night, something began to shift. I had gotten into MIT. I had achieved something that no one, least of all my parents, had believed possible. And yet, here I was, broken. The victory, the dream I had fought for, felt hollow. I had no one to share it with, no one to cheer for me. I had proven them wrong, but in the process, I had lost something important in my connection to them. It was then that I realized what I needed to do. I needed to make them see me not just as their child, but as someone who had the strength to break free from their expectations, to build something for myself. But how? The answer came to me in pieces, like a puzzle slowly coming together. Revenge, not in the way they would expect, not in some grand, dramatic gesture, but in a way that would hurt them deeply through their pride, through their legacy. The business they had built, the world they had created, was the thing they held closest. It was their identity. Without it, they were nothing, and I knew that. So I began to hatch a plan. It started small, just a few ideas planted in my mind like seeds. I knew I couldn't just walk away from them. I had to make them understand the consequences of their actions, of their indifference. I had to make them feel what I felt, what I had been feeling for years. The first step was simple. I began to distance myself. I stopped answering their calls, stopped responding to their messages. When they asked how I was doing, I gave them the standard answer, but it was always short and personal. I didn't want to be cruel, but I couldn't pretend anymore. I also began to dig into the business. I wanted to know everything, what they had built, what they had left undone, what cracks were hidden beneath the surface. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Their success had come at a cost, one that I was willing to pay. But still, there was a part of me that hesitated. My conscience weighed heavily on me. How far was I willing to go? What would this do to my relationship with them? Would it be worth it? The answer, I realized, was yes. They had stolen my happiness, my confidence, and my dreams. Now it was my turn to take something from them. One evening, I found myself sitting alone in my dorm room, staring at the business documents I had uncovered. There was a plan forming, a way to hurt them without destroying everything, but it wasn't just about the business. It was about showing them that I could do something they never thought possible. And with that, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just sit back and watch my life pass by. I wasn't going to let their rejection of me define my future. It was time to take matters into my own hands. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. It was time to confront the betrayal that had shaken me to my core. I would not let it break me. I would turn it into something that would give me the strength to move forward. But as I sat there staring at the plan I'd started to draft, a heavy weight settled in my chest. I knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. It would be filled with regret, with guilt, and with pain. But I also knew that it was a path I had to walk. And so, with a heavy heart, I set my plan into motion. The revenge would be calculated, precise. I wasn't going to destroy everything they still had a place in my life, but they needed to understand the cost of their actions. And I would make sure they never forgot it. The journey was far from over. It had just begun.